Hello, it's Nicole from Practice Indie for Just the Tip Tuesday. Hope you're having a lovely day. So we're talking about standing splits today. So this can be a challenging pose because it takes some balance. It is a strengthening and stability of your standing leg and stretches your hamstrings as well. So if you have tight hamstrings, this can be a challenging posture. So we'll get into some tips on how we can start to make this pose a little bit more accessible, okay? So first thing, I would recommend having 2 blocks to give yourself some support. And so there's a couple different ways to get into this pose. I find it to be easiest to come from like a running or from lunge posture here. So seeing me from the side might be a little better. My hands come on the blocks, reach the blocks out in front of you a little, and then take off on the standing leg and start to float the back leg, okay? So you can see that this isn't really looking like standing splits, it's mostly like an L shape. If I lower the blocks, this allows my chest to come down a little bit further. Okay, so my lifted leg can come a little bit higher. If I bring my hands down to the ground, then my lifted leg can come a little bit higher. My chest comes closer to my thigh. And then I might be able to grab onto my ankle with both of my hands to practice a little balance and stability, okay? So those are just a few levels of progression on how you can use the blocks to kind of get into that shape, okay? So if even floating the leg is a challenge for you, so if you really want to work on stretching the hamstrings, but it's difficult for you to keep the leg lifted because you need some strength in your floating leg to keep it up. So what you can do is use like a chair. I'm going to use the back of my couch. You can use a table or a countertop, whatever is nearby for that leg. So your hands would come down to the blocks, okay? And then you just shift your weight into your standing leg and then bend the opposite leg, lift it up, and then place it on the said support behind you, okay? So here I'm working on stability, okay? So balancing here for my standing leg. I'm feeling a stretch in my hamstring still. And then I can still play with the level of my blocks, okay? So my blocks can lower down. I can lower my chest down. Keep a slight bend in your standing knee so that you don't hyperextend. I can lower my blocks down a little bit more, lower my chest down. I can slide my blocks out of the way. Okay, so this takes some of the work out of your floating leg. You don't have to think about this strength there as much. And then to come out, use your blocks to support you. Just bring that knee in, lower the foot down, and then slowly stand up, okay? So that can be a really great posture to do. Honestly, that felt lovely just now. So I'd highly recommend that. Some other things to consider when you're doing your standing splits is that yes, it's a stretch of your standing leg hamstring, but your floating leg is working. So that's why we just had the option of bringing it onto an object because our floating leg is strengthening by lifting, okay? So as this leg lifts, the back of our leg starts to fire, right? So our glutes, our hamstrings have to work a lot in order to lift that leg. So if you're standing upright and you swing your leg back behind you, you feel your glute start to contract and your hamstrings start to fire, okay? So it's that same concept as you're in this forward fold, okay? So if you use that thought when you're upside down, you can find a deeper expression of the pose and essentially stretch your quads and your hip flexors a little bit more, okay? So you can see here, I'm gonna come into it from that runner's lunge and just take off on that front leg, okay? So right now my leg is active in the back body, but it's not totally engaged. So now I'm going to squeeze my glutes, engage my hamstring, and lift my leg a little higher. And you can see that I can find a little bit more space here, okay? So that does intensify the stretch in the glute and the hamstring of my standing leg, okay? So it works in that opposition. You're strengthening the back of the floating leg, you're stretching the back of the standing leg, okay? So kind of finding that balance. Now, if you want to work towards more mobility in this pose, then you can use a wall for support. Let me use this little slender wall here. So you're going to want to come pretty close to it. As you bend forward, you can still use your blocks here if you want. I'm not going to today. Okay, and then you just shift your weight into one of your feet, okay? And then pick up the other leg, and then just begin to extend it up the wall, okay? Now, if you have a little bit of strength, you can push down into your palms. You can pick up the standing leg to float it, and then place the heel closer to the wall so that you can really press down through the palms to extend your floating leg high to the sky, okay? So essentially trying to get into the splits up against the wall, okay? So now I'm really close to the wall, so I'm gonna lean forward a little, press down into my palms again, press my top foot into the wall, float my standing leg, step it a little closer to my hands so that I can gently slide my floating leg back down and then slowly rise back up, okay? So a little bit of preparatory work to get into handstand when you do that. So that could be something that you work towards eventually too, is picking up both legs and just shimmying your chest towards the wall. And you can do that with blocks. So that's gonna give you more of a stretch through your hip flexors. So I feel that a lot in my standing or in my floating leg hip flexor, but that's because I'm just naturally tighter on that side. And you don't feel it as much in terms of like strengthening the back of the floating leg because you're resting the foot on the wall, so you have less of that muscular engagement to think of and focusing on the stretching, okay? So when you use the wall for support or you use a couch or a chair to support the leg, you're working towards mobility, flexibility, stretching. When you're got your leg lifted, not resting on anything, then you're thinking a little bit more of your floating leg as strengthening, okay? So those were a few tips for your standing splits. Hopefully you have fun. Give it a try. This is really nice to bring it up against a surface that is level with the hips or even lower than the hips. And if you want to get into the hip flexors with a little bit more depth, bring it to the wall. Obviously, you don't have to slide it all the way up to the wall and press your crotch against the wall. Just do what feels good, okay? All right, you guys have a great day, and I'll see you on your mat. Bye.